Hey, welcome everyone. I'm very excited about this panel. It's I think we are going to have a lot of fun. We're having two panelists here with us at this session. And the title of this session is called Planting the Roots from Idea to Team Building, which is basically all about, like, the intention behind this session was to invite some experienced entrepreneurs who tried to start companies before, build their own companies before, and seeing it, like, what happens from the early stages to all the way when you build a team and you build a product. So we could have an open discussion on the hurdles, challenges, but also the nice and enjoyable part of this journey, and maybe dig into some of the areas of it. Yeah, let's perhaps start with a short intro round. I'm thinking maybe you should just introduce yourself. That's the best. So if you could just go ahead and just say one or two lines about yourself. Onur, why don't you just start?
Sure. Thanks a lot for having me here, Geza. In a nutshell, I'm an engineer. I worked as an engineer during my studies, but never had the sort of pleasure to work full-time as an engineer, which is still haunting me this day to day. I've been on the commercial side working for KPMG on M&A, doing tech and financial due diligences. And afterwards, I was in Maersk, the shipping line, investing in startups in a corporate VC setup. And right now, I am myself. I have a portfolio of 4 or 5 startups where I have invested my own money, but also helping day to day in everything from operations to financial modeling to finding investors and sort of like putting down the strategy. And actually, quite interesting right now, I am about to join a startup. So this is more relevant than ever for me. So I'm looking forward to share some of my past experience, but also how that reflects to what I'm doing right now as we speak.
Awesome. Sujala.
Hey, Geza, thank you. And thanks everyone for joining us. My name is Sujala. I come from a background in food science and engineering. So I'm a scientist and an engineer, and now adding entrepreneur to that role. I've been working in the food industry for 15 plus years, doing everything from R&D, product development, innovation, commercialization. Most recently for a large dairy company, doing operations and scale up, and left that role to dedicate my career to something more meaningful by working in the sustainable food systems, and currently have a startup in the ancient grain space, creating space for millets in the plant-based food ecosystem, and also have a plant-based dairy startup that's in stealth mode, been working on a innovative product concept for the last year or so.
Huw.
Hey, so my background is in computer engineering and sustainable energy. I spent 7 years basically focused on the transition from conventional energy sources to renewables and away from oil and gas. I have a secondary, very strong interest, or at least had, in food, and that's become my primary interest in recent years, which is, of course, what brings me to this panel. I did an MBA at the University of Oxford a couple of years ago, where I was the president of the Synthetic Biology Society there, and I'm recovering from the startup life by building a startup that builds startups. I was previously the COO of New Age Meats in San Francisco. Then spent some time mentoring deep tech startups across a number of industries as part of a number of London's top incubators. And I'm currently building something called Counterfactual Ventures, which is basically trying to ease the customer journey or the founder journey for new founders looking to enter this space, find somebody to work on, understand what to work on, and where the cruxes and the white space are. We are partnered with the science and technology team at GFI, working very closely with Oxford, Cambridge, and Imperial, but I'm a very, very wide reach and currently building a fund. I have a secondary interest in another transition from sugar to sort of alternatives and using synthetic biology to help tackle diabetes and sugar issues.
Awesome. Sujala just suddenly disappeared from this call, but I hope everything is fine. Yeah, everything is all right on your side. Perfect. So it's funny because we had this pre-call before this session and we talked about potential topics to dig into. And then we just got a question from Christian from Plentyvext, who is basically covering all the areas we wanted to dig into. I think it's just so, so spot on. So I will just read up this question. I want to make a company soon. However, I feel like finding a team, partners, and investors is a vicious cycle. All of them seem to require the other parts to be in place. How did you go about finding team and investors in the right order yourself? And that's just that's such a good question, and we anyways wanted to actually dig into the sub areas of all this. So why don't we just start by digging into the idea part? I can imagine that also all of you sometimes receive some reach out from people who have good ideas and they want to do something about it. What is your recommendation? How do you get started? How to get a grip on it?
I can take a stab at it first because I've been in that place twice, and it definitely is a vicious cycle if you want to have everything in place when you're starting. But what I've learned is that you start with what you can do, like you have your core why as to why you're starting that company. And if you want to bring on the partners and investors and all the players right in the beginning, and if that's the goal you're going to have as you're starting off, that's going to be really hard. And that is, I guess that could get overwhelming and kind of distract you. What I've learned is that just start with what you can, and then the right people kind of come to you because they are attracted to your vision and what you're doing. And same thing goes for investors. I mean, investors may not necessarily come following you right away, but if you are working towards something that's game changing, that's innovative, that sets you apart, then the right investors will align as you are going through the fundraising process. But you're not going to be able to have all the parts in place right from the get-go, and you should be okay with that. You start the process one step at a time, whether you're developing the product into a commercializable product or taking the technology from an idea stage to a stage where you can broadcast what you're doing in a much more efficient way. Whatever that looks like, start with what you can do on your own, and then start talking to the right people in your network or wherever there are opportunities, and participate in networks like Protein Directory, GFI, places like these, and you will start connecting with people who align with what you're doing.
Awesome. Just get started, as I understand it. I'm just thinking that sometimes the problem is that it's tough to get clarity about an idea. People have a rough idea and they want to build the whole ecosystem of products as a start, but then how to find the core of that? Onur, do you have an input on that?
I very much second what Sujala said on like getting started. So I think what like the worst thing you can do is judging how good your idea is without sharing with the like other world, other people. So I think if you have something, if you think you know that you have a good idea, share it. You might not have the product yet, but you know, write a Medium article about it, like do something, start a newsletter, you know, start like little by little building the hype and traction around what you're going to build. Because like I think like it's the era of execution, and it's very, very easy to execute on ideas nowadays. It's very easy to build, but I think, you know, getting your idea out there and getting that feedback from other people is very, very important. So the sooner you do that, the better you can shape your scope around like the idea that you have, because the more you think about it, the more pitfalls you see, the more risk you see, like the more everything you see, then, you know, that becomes your hurdle for not doing it. So I think, you know, finding those 5, 6, 10 people that could have, you know, quality input on your idea could be very, very good. So I think, you know, don't keep it to yourself, just share it with people, get the feedback, go back to your drawing board, and then go from there. I think that's my 2 cents on that.
Awesome.
To add to that really quickly, I think it is worth caveating though that, you know, if we look at Protein Directory or Olivia Fox-Caban's maps over in the US, we do see that there are lots and lots of startups doing some very, very similar things. And you find that new entrepreneurs, just by virtue of this space being quite difficult to navigate, quite difficult to kind of pick apart and understand the levers within, they do tend to anchor on, in the plant-based side, things like Oatly, or, you know, try to mimic the success of Impossible or Beyond or others. So we see a lot of quite basic format products and quite basic technologies at the moment. And the more sort of upstream deep tech side of things, like extrusion technologies on the plant side, or bioreactors and culture, or media, differentiation factors, growth factors, being quite neglected. I mean, if we look at Europe, we've got kind of one, maybe a couple of others, depending on what you do up, companies focused on bioreactors, and kind of a very similar, very small number focused on media. So can be quite helpful to go and, you know, find yourself advisors who have more of a kind of helicopter view and can see that wider space. Yeah, being aware that when you enter this space and have an idea, that's probably just the first bit of the space that you come into contact with, and that will, in a very overweighted way, be, sorry, my dog is ringing his bell in the background. Correct. I'll be back with you in a second. That is, it's very much, you know, what you see on the high street quite often if you look at the number of companies entering the space and what they do.
Awesome. I'm thinking if we should address team and culture or funding as a next step. Perhaps we can go with the team and culture. We just got a question at the same time. So I remember, Sujala, you mentioned previously that in the beginning you have to communicate your values and your mission, and that will be also the way you ultimately find people who can help you and maybe even join forces with you. Could you elaborate on this part, like how to kind of sell your product when you have nothing yet, but you need new competencies?
Yeah, thanks for that question. It's my favorite topic to talk about too, because I left the corporate role for that very reason, because it did not align well with my vision and what I wanted to do with the career impact the impact that I wanted to make with my career. So it's a misalignment of values for me as an employee and for the organization and the vision and mission that they had. So as a startup, when you are doing your first few hires, or maybe hires down the road, doesn't matter, but you have to be really clear with what the mission is, or what is your big vision, and does that align well with the people that you're bringing on board? Similar to the investors, similar to the partners, whoever it is that you're working with, it's important to convey that right away. And when you don't even have a product or a product on the shelf and you're looking to hire, then you need to be able to sell your dream, pretty much, like sell your vision. And I guess Simon Sinek's Start With Why has really, you know, gained wide attention, and about the millennial workplace culture, like where people are not just willing to or settle for just profits. It's, you know, we live in a culture where purpose matters more than profits. So that's so important to keep in mind when you're hiring. Yeah, and like I said, for some people, it could be that maybe they want a flexible lifestyle, or maybe they're looking for a better compensation. And for some people, it could be because they want to work in changing the world for the better place, which I believe that's a lot of the people listening to this panel right now are. So in that case, we need to be able to convey how we're going to do that right from the get-go, so we're aligned in our vision, and we create an open space for that discussion. And I see that more as a dialogue rather than, you know, like a dictating of what's written on the company's website as a mission and vision.
Awesome. I believe that part of this discussion, like of course, people want to join with a company that has a mission and vision, but when that happens, especially in the early stages, usually people also get some parts, like some shares of the company, of the startup company. And I'm just thinking, Onur and Huw, you have some extensive experience when it comes to shareholder agreements and early alignments between team members. Like, can you come up with some examples? How could that compensation look like? Like how to bring new team members on board when you're in such an early stage? What can you offer them besides the values and mission? Yeah. So Onur, why don't you just go ahead? Or Huw, yeah, you already.
Okay, Onur, you please feel free to go ahead.
Just go ahead, Huw.
Cool, great. So, I mean, look, it really comes down to whether we're talking about founders or we're talking about first employees, okay? Because for the latter, it's a little bit simpler. We're looking to offer them somewhere to really have, you know, what startups uniquely offer, which is much more autonomy than they would have in a corporate, much more of an ability to take ownership of something important and create something important, and, you know, look back in 1 or 2 years and see tremendous growth that they've achieved. Very often, you know, corporates seem very static by comparison. And then, you know, good traditional leadership, not traditional in the corporate sense, but, you know, value alignment and ensuring, you know, that you build a good corporate culture and team building and so forth. But really, startups are a lot of fun to work. So it's always, you know, much easier to work with first employees. Founder alignment, though, that is, you know, something that's dealt with on the financial side by a sort of long vesting period and earning for years. And, you know, that really aligns incentives around financial gain. But regarding mission and impact and what you actually do to make that money, that is more difficult. And I think that's, you know, that's something that has not been fully solved yet. We've found, between my co-founder and I, that, you know, regular open communication, trust, and you know, listening to each other and navigating things together as two parts of one mind is absolutely critical. But I think we're still, as a community, trying to figure out how best to maintain impact alignment as social partnership and impact investment become more mainstream.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm just browsing the questions at the same time. We get a lot of questions on investments and when forming a venture that will raise external capital between two existing corporates, can you raise external funding without having a team in place? Can you raise funds for a venture with just a CEO in place? Yeah, I'm thinking maybe we could jump to that point where, okay, you got an idea, an early idea, and you half tested it by asking people and validating it. But then you realize that you need some money. Let's say, actually, Christian had this question, what happens if you have an idea that requires a lot of money to make it happen? What do you do? Onur, what do you do then? Do you go ahead and then raise $100 million to build a factory without a half, or with a half idea, without a product, or what do you do?
I mean, you probably do that if you're a San Francisco hotshot having, you know, dozens of exits. Then you raise $100 million from SoftBank and get going. But I think when you have a very capital extensive idea that you need to sort of like execute on, then first of all, think about, okay, do you have the right competencies, first of all, to carry this forward? Because like if you have that, and if it's a very capital extensive game, so I think maybe, combining that with university research, I think that's a way to go, because, it's rare that VC funds are willing to put in a lot of money in CapEx investments and R&D research if you don't have a proven track record. So if you are a founder, like successful founder with multiple exits, then you might be able to do that. But if not, then you want to look at, okay, how can I combine this with existing and reliable and, respectable institutions or, organizations to push it forward. So maybe you can join, I don't know, another company who might happen to have a branch looking at something that you think, could be interesting as an idea, and then you can join them. It creates some reliability and credibility, and you can, apply for EU funding, for example. Some of these pockets, these pockets are very, very deep. The application process is very cumbersome, but it's worth the sort of effort if you don't have the sort of, the CV or experience that is needed to raise that 100 million. So there's no sort of easy way around this. So either you partner up with some universities, you do a PhD, you do a postdoc, whatever, and then do this on the side to push it forward, or you have a rich uncle who put in the money, or you join an existing organization with deep pockets. So I think, it's very, very tough, right? So like I don't have, on top of my head, other ways of like going around this, because it's going to take you a lot of years. It's going to be capital extensive. What do? You cannot hack it at home. It's very difficult. So you go other ways. So I think
previously we talked about evaluating founder markets, like founder/market/product fit. I think that's a little bit maybe related to what you say, Onur, that just to, how to say, maybe it sounds a little bit rough, but are you the right founder for that idea? So do you really want to struggle through and do all that what you just mentioned to bring that R&D project to life? Any of you has any suggestion on how to kind of evaluate that, how to reflect on this, how to have this conversation with yourself?
I also want to add to what Onur said, that the other opportunity that exists is incubators or accelerators. I feel like there is more accelerators now than there was even 2 years ago, particularly in the alt protein space. So some of the cell-like companies are taking advantage of that opportunity because even if they don't have a product, they have the concept and they're able to actually prove it is difficult. It is challenging when you don't have anything to show. But if you can put together a convincing pitch deck and apply for these incubators, like sell your big idea in a way that they understand the opportunity, and going back to your point on founder product market fit, show that you are the right person to execute on this idea, and that you have the skills and you have the experience, and either you have the network or you'll bring on people that you can collaborate with that can help you leverage those connections or expertise. So I think that's one option, which did not exist at all 5 years ago, but now we have that as an option. So that's one way, and obviously it's not the only way, but I feel like with the rate that the industry is going as well, we're going to see a lot more of these, whether accelerators or companies that are creating venture capital arms that are willing to come in and support early stage startups with our products.
Awesome. I'm thinking that Huw, you're running this venture architecting firm that you are assembling companies within white space areas. And that's maybe a little bit the other way around, that you identify white space areas, meaning some high potential areas, and then you're trying to build a team around those ideas, as far as I understand. So it's a bit the other way around. How do you approach building a team when you have an amazing idea?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, you know, if you just for reference look at the typical best practice for assessing a deep tech company, which is what we're building primarily. I mean, we are looking at other areas, but what we want to do is build technologies that powerfully upgrade the entire industry. You are looking at the founders, and as a general, you are looking as a VC at trajectories in pretty much everything you assess, right? So you're looking for the individual founders and whether you believe that they can do this ridiculously difficult thing. And then you're trying to work out, okay, given the ridiculously difficult thing, is that actually valuable? Does anybody want to be a customer, or are we just going to be able to create the ridiculously difficult thing? What we're doing is kind of backing out of the industry and saying, okay, look, what are all of the challenges that exist at the moment? Which existing startups want to be solved, but themselves don't actually have, you know, economic justification to solve. So if you start building your own bioreactors, unless you're at a particularly large scale, which given this industry's nascency, you're typically not, it will cost you a lot and it will take you a long time to repay. It's probably not your core value prop. You're probably a company that's trying to make consumer products. So, you know, a lot of companies are now trying to make their own media or trying to make bioreactor modifications. But if companies can pop up to do that, then that's very valuable for the industry. So we look at what those sorts of opportunities are, and then we back out of them and say, okay, say this company existed now, who would the people have been who founded that? Who are, you know, the best people in the world to build this particular technology? So rather than saying, okay, what's your idea? Why are you the best person in the world for the idea you're bringing? We're basically creating the idea and backing into the founder. It is otherwise, you know, following the same principles and assessing the same things, but as you say, in a slightly different order.
Awesome. So we already digged a little bit into investments. Onur mentioned maybe getting some EU grants or national grants, but it's also a possibility to get VC investment. I'm just wondering, are there other ways to work it around when you're bootstrapping? Like what you also mentioned, having a rich uncle, that's also a solution. But what happens if you still cannot attract investment, or maybe you don't want in the early stage, you want to, how to say, evolve your idea for a little bit longer time before you get someone on board. I'm just thinking, like, how can you develop your product without external investment in the beginning?
I mean, it really depends on how long you can hold your breath, right? So you need some financial income to cover your basic expenses. So if you sort of like do your own runway and burn rate, like how long can you go without, you know, earning money? And that time you dedicate like on your startup. Otherwise, I mean, keeping your job on the side, you know, working somewhere where you have some potential synergies with what you're doing, and combining that, you know, with your hobby and startup. I think, you know, you might not reach it in 1 year, but maybe in 2 years, then you have a startup. So I think rather like go steady and safe than rush, you know, all the way. So I think many people are, I mean, you are reading all these blogs and posts, different places, like keep your job, have a steady flow of income. And if you have synergies with what you want to do, you know, then that's the perfect mix, because then you don't need to be two places at the same time, because your mindset, you know, more or less needs to be the same. So I think that's also a way to do it. And of course, it depends on, you know, your like how risk averse you are, you know, how much are you willing to put everything, you know, out there at once? You know, are you betting everything on red? Are you quitting your job, doing this full time for half a year to see what, like, where it goes? And of course, you can always go back to the corporate world afterwards. But the other way around, you are de-risking it might take you 2 years. There might be other competitors coming out there, but then you're sure that like you build up something that you can compete in the market with. So I think that's also a way to go.
I think this is very interesting, that maybe part of building a company is staying at a job and then improving the idea slowly, and when you're ready to jump, then you go all in. Do you have any additional points to this, Sujala?
Yeah, I was going to say, thanks, Onur, for that validation, because that's exactly what I did when I when I started my first company, Kosher Foods. I worked I worked full time, and I was a food scientist working in a large company. So I didn't have a whole lot of business related skills. So I thought I'm going to go to business school and get a part-time MBA. And that's how that journey started. But eventually I figured out that that's going to take me pretty much the same amount of time as to working part-time in figuring out what I'm doing with my startup. So I put in 2 years of side hustle before leaving my full-time role to become a full-time entrepreneur. And even then I accumulated years of experience before I was even able to do that. So my backup was that I wasn't going to generate revenue as soon as I quit my job. I had a little bit of cash flow or runway saved up, and my backup plan was to use my experience to do some consulting work for whether it's food companies or any other businesses or organizations that could use my expertise to make some side income while I generate revenue. And in the meantime, while living very modestly and minimally, there is lots of sacrifices you're going to make. And whatever the Instagram pictures are showing you for the life of an entrepreneur is not always true. It's not very glamorous when you're leaving your paycheck and trading it for uncertainty in the early stages. So you should be willing to make some hard compromises and sacrifices in order to potentially realize your long-term dream.
This is very inspirational. Thanks for sharing, Sujala. So soon we are running out of time. I was thinking, any other questions from the audience you would like to get answered? Feel free to ask now. But otherwise, thanks everyone for being part of this. Onur, do you have something to add?
Yeah. It's. I mean, don't get me wrong. You can keep your job and do your startup, but I mean, there's this very nice quote saying, 9 out of 10 startups fail, but 10 out of 10 founders win. So you're half a year of like grinding and hustling and all these things that, you know, the buzzwords that they keep saying. You actually, I mean, build a humongous sort of, you know, a library of information within that field when you are out there as a startup founder. Even 6 months is very valuable. So you can, I mean, I'm not saying that you become an expert all of a sudden, but you can use that knowledge to step into another career, like trajectory or whatever you like. Like, it's not lost anything, like not at all. It's an investment. You might lose some money, but if you have the breadth and if you can, you know, stay in the game for like 6 months, 12 months, whatever, I think that's only going to benefit you in the long term.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you know, signing yourself up to be an entrepreneur is a very, very challenging journey, and that is great because it will strengthen you and teach you things and connect you with people. And it's actually, I would imagine this is Onur and Sujala's experience as well, but for some reason, nobody ever checks how big your company is. So if you approach senior directors in other large companies like Unilever and you say, hey, I'm CEO of this thing, they'll like just have conversations with you, which is pretty incredible. So you will actually find that somehow you gain a lot more authority in whatever field you're working in. I think just further to the couple of points that were made previously, one is that, you know, I think there is a lot of kind of celebration of suffer in entrepreneurship, and you know, it's already enough suffer to kind of not have any revenue and have extreme ambiguity well beyond anything that you would experience in consulting, for example. what you're actually working on and how to get there. So, you know, very, very often it can be an extremely good idea to go to a, you know, initially friend, family, or fool, as they say, and 3Fs, or an early stage venture capitalist, and essentially get a kind of form of insurance from them whereby you sacrifice some small amount of equity for the ability to alleviate a lot of the stress. I mean, we, you know, kind of factual, we talked to a lot of people on the technical and scientific side, for example, who are extraordinarily talented and would absolutely build the technologies that this industry needs, but don't want to break their back under, you know, the burden of like having to eat noodles for the next 6 months. So, you know, it's sort of the difference between making like £1 billion and £900 million. Ultimately, when you get there, it won't be noticeable. There are, you know, some people who just want to play the Forbes game and see if they can get themselves up the list. But I mean, ultimately, you know, if you want a very high chance of success, recruiting others to help you does make a lot of sense. So, yeah.
Awesome. Perfect. Thanks everyone so much for being part of this. I think this was very inspirational and lots of learnings.